Hey everybody, I really appreciate you joining. I know with all these conferences being digital, it can be monotonous and tiring to look at presentations. So I can speak for the rest of my authors and say we really appreciate that you've taken time to watch our presentation on what we think is a really important topic. I'm going to walk through all the details. We'll try to keep this brief, as brief as I can make it. And if anyone has any questions, I put up all of our contact information, specifically my email, in case you want to contact me that way. If you want more details about the study or asking questions about how we're doing anything, just let me know. Hopefully I will do this correctly with the sharing a screen, because I have 3 screens I'm working with here. So any issues here, you can definitely blame me. But also want to say a quick thanks to NASSM for making this free and accessible for everybody. That's really awesome. All right. Let's see if we can get this started. Okay. You can probably see me up here in the top right corner. I'm gonna have to test this to make sure it worked correctly, but our study, as listed in the NASSM program, is gonna be when home becomes work, the pandemic's impact on work and family for college sport employees. The thing I would add onto here that is kind of more also as important as our title is kind of where we've kind of pivoted. There's been a rush to do a lot of studies that are related to COVID. And I think there's been some fair questions about what's the longevity of those studies and how they're going to be impactful moving forward. And I think that was an important piece for us when we did this. And I'll give some background a little bit on the data collection, but I think it's important to start that with a title. This is thinking about how this project has manifested into our manuscript is going to be looking at how that title has changed. And so you can kind of see on here how that title, this is kind of really what our title looks like now, because to me and my co-authors, the biggest focus has been on the change in workplace flexibility. COVID has really altered how we are completing work. I'm shooting this from my office at home because I've only gone up to my office on campus a handful of times since this whole thing started, most of the time just to grab something and to head back into the security of being in my house. And now that I'm shooting this, we obviously have maybe some more safety that's going on in the United States, at least, that where I could head up to the office more often, but it's almost becoming more habitual for me just to work at home. And so to me, that workplace flexibility is really getting to the core kind of our study, and we'll sprinkle that in throughout we go on. But I do want to highlight my co-authors on this. We have done great collaboration. Elizabeth Taylor, who's at Temple University, me and her have worked quite a few times together. And obviously we've had some more recent projects that have been really fruitful. And we have some projects that we're working on, and we'll probably be working together till the end of time, just because I feel like our data is never ending. But a newbie for our group has been Eric Martin. Eric's been a great addition. He's provided some actually great, unique perspectives and done some fantastic writing and analysis for us. But this is kind of a really unique and awesome collaboration for us to put all these pieces together. And so I have included all of our Twitter handles there, so you can kind of see all the details there in our institutional affiliations. But to give kind of quick an introduction for our study is, we're looking at, there's been studies pointing out how we're going through a bunch of global workforce changes. And this is even pre-COVID or pandemic or anything, where workplace flexibility is becoming more cherished and promoted and prioritized within corporate, I don't want to say even just corporate America, but even corporations and private equity firms and all the businesses, nonprofit and for-profit that are out there. That workplace flexibility is being seen as a great benefit to employees. And now that more information is trickling in, that organizations seem to be less concerned about providing that flexibility, knowing that performance is still going to be maintained. So it's also coming at an opportune time where work-family balance or work-life balance is really getting eviscerated. We're seeing for a multitude of reasons that are having some good and some bad, that you're having dual earning couples out there working in the workforce, which has led to some challenges of more work going on than life and more complications related to the work schedule of actually completing some stuff out there. But now the organizations are seeing this. They're actually using workplace flexibility very much as a recruitment and retention tool. And I think that's great in some ways. But as we can see going over the next column, college athletics has been notoriously slow at adopting not only workplace flexibility, but pretty much any workplace changes because of concern about how that might make them less competitive. And a lot of it stems from athletics having a very wonky schedule. People work really late. People work on weekends. Sometimes people have to get up really early for a meeting. Sometimes you have to travel across the country or to outside of the country to follow a team's participation. Or you have an entire meeting or conference meetings. And then the pressure outwitting, especially for coaches, and that's also trickling into administrators, is either sustaining or only growing. It's just creating a very tough work environment for athletics. And so athletics is becoming more rigid about making changes because they're afraid of what those changes would look like. Now, it could be that you could have someone at the top that would portray those changes, but a lot of times, especially coaches, seem to be the showrunners on deciding what is promoted from a workplace expectation level. And that's just creating a more and more toxic work environment. And that's coming out into all these issues that's essentially creating friction between where every other business seems to be heading with workplace flexibility and what athletics is not trying to portray. Now, my photo might be cutting this out, but for an importance of workplace flexibility, we're looking at, you're seeing that the more an employee works from home, like via telecommuting, the less work interferes with family. And so that's great. Like that's we've been finding out with some details here. That work is then spilling over, as we're going to get into family less, but family can interfere more with work. So there is some challenges there. It is a give and take. We're going to talk more about work-life balance this upcoming and about how it is this scale that's essentially going on in years. You can't just add more to balance things out. At some point it does become incalculable that you have to give time for work or give time for family for the other. Now, this workplace flexibility is not only going to be important during this pandemic, and I think this is going to hit home on why the importance of this. This is going to become the norm, either already has or will be in almost all employee sectors. Not only just workplace flexibility, but work from home is going to become very much reality. And even though I was just spouting about how athletics is very rigid, I have talked in a different study about a couple of universities that I know for sure, at least in athletics, that they're having conversations about maintaining some type of hybrid model for work, that employees might be able to work a couple days from home a week, and then will be required to work in the office of the others. And to me, that's a monumental step, and hopefully things are changing. But this just shows that the workplace flexibility is really the focus of our study. The pandemic is creating a really interesting context, or as a friend of mine, Dr. Marlene Dixon would say, a very distinct context for us, that you're going from within the context of athletics, a situation where everyone had to work in the office, that there was very, 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 very few exceptions for people that would work from home, to now you're having a required, from a public health standpoint, of everyone having to work from home, and barring very, very, very few exceptions, that people would actually be going into the office. And so this is giving us a chance to look at not only an institution from a vocational standpoint that's very slow to adopt changes, being required to adopt those changes, but also seeing where we would be looking right into a business that is not flip-flopping. Like this is what they do, that they aren't having some of their employees that are working from home and some that aren't. Like everyone was having to work from the office. And then I kind of have this great little quote here from the manuscript we are working on, about how essentially flexible work environment provides some real positivity. But the big thing is there's has never been a study. I don't want to say the word never because I'm sure maybe I missed something, but there's very little out there about research involving the same employees experiencing an environmental shift. And that's going to kind of lead into the study overview for us. The purpose of this study was to investigate employee perceptions following a rapid, as we all experience, change in workplace flexibility within college sport. And again, using college sport to me is important because not only did they go through the rapid change of all of us did, that everyone was required to, but college sport was on the very tip of the spear of making people have to work from the office and not from home. Now, as you can see, we looked at a number of concepts that I'm going to kind of go over here in a little bit that are important for employees. But I think what really makes our study distinct and provides some cool identification for us is that we surveyed thousands. We had got data collection from thousands of full-time athletic department employees in November 2019. So vision, that's what you're talking 3-4 months before the COVID-19 pandemic fully broke out, at least here in the United States, and shut everything down. But then we also were able to collect data from those same exact people in May 2020 after all the expectations that occurred. So all of the data that we're going to be presenting here is going to be only from people that completed our study on the what we're calling the pre-pandemic study and the post-pandemic study. So all this data would be coupled within the same population, the exact same population. So really, there are people that filled out the prior, but no, they would also have to fill out the post to complete or to be presented within this. Anyone that filled out the pre and not the post will not be included. Now, I don't want to go over too much of this, but I'm going to put up these definitions and I'm not going to read through these, but these were 2 of the 4 major pieces we want to look at. As you can imagine, work-family spillover is a really interesting concept. There's a lot going on with work-family balance, work-life balance, work-family conflict, and that is looking at the conflict balance that's going on. But spillover to me is more pertinent to the situation right now because you're being forced to work at home with your family. Now, this may not be as pertinent potentially for people that be single living alone, but the great majority of the people that we surveyed are going to be people that have a partner, are living with family, whether that's kids, their parents, extended family. It also potentially would include any adoptions or situations along those lines. But to me, this spillover is really important, that it's requiring the spilling over, almost an integration, which is also talked about in the field. But it provides a really interesting context for us. Another one is employer prestige. We all kind of perceive the organization we work for, whether in a positive or negative light, and that can change depending on the situation at hand. It also can adopt depending on what your organization stands for, what they don't stand for, all that. Location can play a piece in that, but it's usually pretty limited on that. But there hasn't been very much out there on employer prestige within college athletics, which I think is really interesting because I do think universities have a strong brand association. I don't want to get too much into the marketing side, but I do think that certain universities are looked at with higher esteem, depending on, especially in athletics. One that comes to mind always is like a Stanford University or Grand Valley State University, which I have to mention as consistent Rector Cup winners that potentially would be looked at in a positive light across all athletics. But obviously there's other things besides team success that would go into that. And then 2 much more employee-oriented pieces is job commitment. There's been a lot out there on career commitment, but not much on specific job commitment, which I think is really important for this one in the sense of jobs were at risk during COVID pandemic, especially when athletics completely stopped, that there was none going on. And people, I'm sure, were very scared about whether they were going to keep their job or if it was just going to be furloughs or if they were going to get their hours cut, salary reductions, whatever that is. But on top of that, I think the job was very important because while their career was important, it was a very hard time to be switching their job within their career. They couldn't just necessarily hop from one university to the next because almost all athletics were essentially putting a freeze on employment. It was kind of just hold on to who you want or the people you have, and maybe you do cuts, but you don't hire anyone outside. And then workaholism. I think this is a concept that's used commonly in regular conversation, but I was thinking of this as someone that's definitely overcommitted to their job, and they end up doing way more for their job than being asked, and ends up hurting other areas of their life outside of that. But I think, and as we're going to talk about, it's like a good question: does workaholism, is it going to get reduced or flourish within being confined to the home? I'm going to get to the hypothesis, and we'll talk a little bit about why I think it'll will flourish within the concept. Just doing a review here of methodology. You can see we had a little over 1,100 people that filled out both the pre and post survey. So I think we have a really, really good sample. This includes all NCAA levels, and the demographics we had aligned with our target population. We use Qualtrics to send it out. And as I already talked about, the dates that we included on that. And then I've included the general names that are known for there. We had some alterations, like there isn't a very good job commitment scale out there that we had a lot of trust in. So we did do very, very small alterations to a career commitment scale that Blau has also reputedly used in the past as well. So the good thing is we had some support there from reliability and validity concept on there. Now, a lot of words on this slide, but I want to point out, especially hypothesis 1 through 4 are all pretty close. 2 and 4 are very close. The only difference is going to be your underlined words. You can see the importance pieces for each of those on what we think. But as you can see, especially 2 through 4, we're expecting an increase for perceived external prestige. Especially if you're someone that's still working at your universities through tough times, there's some research out there that might lead to a higher PEP. It also might mean that you think that the university is making good decisions on holding on to people. Obviously, employment can have a huge perception bump for that. We also think job commitment could go up. People could have felt like they were at risk of losing their job during the pandemic, so they might have started committing to their job even more as a safety mechanism. And that would also dovetail what we thought was into hypothesis 4, with we thought workaholism was going to go up. And then hypothesis 1 is where we think there's going to be a reduction of negative spillover. That was really big for us. We think with more people working at home, that they're more accessible to be able to handle family responsibilities, which is a big time problem for people that work in athletics. So therefore, you're going to see a reduction of that negative spillover. That's what we thought, is that, man, the negative spillover is going to really go down for both negative work situations spilling into family, and also negative family situations spilling into work. So that was kind of where we thought maybe there wouldn't be a significant change in positive work family work, but that it would potentially reduce some of the angst that's happened in athletics in the past. And then hypothesis 5 is going to delve into, we're going to do some structural equation modeling, looking at how you perceive your organization, whether that mediates relationship between positive and negative work family spillover and job commitment when controlling for the gender and parental status. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit more as well. Now, I know I'm getting right into it. So here's our findings for hypothesis 1 through 4. When you're reading hypothesis 1 in there with work family spillover and family work spillover, you can see that we didn't just see a pattern of just a reduction negative. We actually saw that there's a pattern of an improvement in, like it says here, lower levels of negative work family spillover and significant higher levels of positive work family spillover. So we are seeing that there's significance within the work family spillover for both positive and negative, but there wasn't any significant relationship between negative and positive family work spillover, which is really interesting. Also, perceived external prestige was up. We saw significantly higher levels of that after the pandemic. Job commitment showed no significant differences, which is interesting. We'll talk about that. And then also workaholism saw significantly higher levels after the pandemic as well. So I put all the p-values in there just to give you an assessment, kind of where things were. Now, oh man, I know lots of data on here, and I'm not going to belabor going through all this stuff, but the one to really look at is the big box on the bottom. It's our table 7. You can see anything significant there would show that there was a significant differences between the pre onset of COVID-19 model and the post-onset COVID-19 model. And you can see everything is in the exact same order, all three tables, and you can see that on the far left will be either there was a direct effect or the two indirect effects that we were looking at, which was positive work-family spillover to job commitment as mediated by perceived external prestige, and then negative family spillover in the same modeling. For our discussion, kind of looking at it, is we saw that employees indicated less negative work family spillover and more positive work family spillover after transitioning to work at home. This could result, these results could signal that employees are spending more time at home regardless of reason, are now seeing a reduction of guilt to be physically present in the office and less pressure from administrators to prioritize their work over other roles. And that could lead to a reduction in like work family or work related conflicts that influence the family domain. So that's big. Without that pressure, then you're also seeing that the lack of change for both family work domains from pre to post onset can be seen as a positive as well. This means that even though now you're having to work with your family, you would think that after reading the first part, maybe that means we'd be at a risk of seeing greater negative situations related to family work, but we aren't. So to me, this is a win-win. Working at home may not be moving a needle much for family work spillover from a positive or negative standpoint, but it's raising the bar by lowering the amount of negative and raising the amount of positive situations you're having from work family spillover. So to me, this first hypothesis is a full-fledged support sign for working at home. Hypothesis 2 is showing that there's an increased PEP for people going from traditional office to working at home. And this shows that it's like providing some of the first support we've seen for perceived external prestige increasing during a time of economic uncertainty. And so that's something that's been argued about before, but hasn't really been examined. And so like mostly PEP has been associated with tangible benefits such as pay or fringe benefits, and I guess you could associate this as still being connected with pay. This is going from like a no pay to a pay situation, but it's also showing that we don't really have a ton of relationship examination between this and work family dynamics. Now, the job commitment, I put up some data here support on why we thought it was going to be an increase, but it wasn't. And I think this lack of significant differences is pretty noteworthy in the sense that it suggests employers can offer a more flexible work schedule without having to worry about an increase or decrease for job commitment. And I think the last part is really important. Organizations have been timid about making a job commitment adjustment, thinking that people would be less committed if they're working from home, but we aren't seeing that. So if you feel like that there is some association with working from home and physical associations, like being in the office or being in the building, this isn't necessarily negating that, but maybe that's essentially being overblown and that people really want to essentially still be associated with it. And that association doesn't necessarily have to be physical. And this could change essentially from like the pandemic might be altering our thoughts on workplace dynamics, especially being present. Now, hypothesis for workaholism, my big takeaway here is that it just could be that there's a lack of barrier between work and home that's letting workaholism really thrive, where you might be working really hard and you might be a workaholic at home or at work, but even the physical process of driving home or taking the train or bus or walking home is providing that little bit of barrier that can help you unplug from work that workaholism really struggles to do. But when you take a workaholic and make their home life their work life, it's just showing that their work then this takes over. And that's a real big problem. And I think this would be something that athletics is going to have to worry about. I do think there's a lot of workaholics that work in college athletics, and knowing that if they work from home, that this might just exacerbate their negative workplace behaviors and take them home. That's something that hopefully the employer can help mitigate. And then here we had some negative differences that happened there within our model, which is really interesting. I mean, I think this suggests that there's a greater impact on job commitment post-onset COVID than it did pre-COVID, and that you're seeing that. And so it's illustrating the importance of allowing employees flexibility in the workplace, especially in times of this great upheaval. But also it's important to note that there was not significant differences in the family work relationships. I think that suggests a work spilling over into the family realm in both a positive and negative way is more impactful on an employee's job commitment. And so there's been some studies out there. I know Dr. Taylor and a couple of her colleagues in 2019 that we had found some similar results of that, but might be suggesting employees may be better able to navigate the impacts of family and the work as opposed to work on their family. That's it. I went a little bit long. I apologize if you ended this before then, that's fine. I also want to end on a beautiful fairway here, because if you need to find me, hopefully I will be at a golf course, but if not, you can send me a tweet or a message on there if you want, or you can shoot me an email. We can talk more about this study or anything that you may want to talk about related to this, and hopefully I can help. But I really appreciate you joining us, and thanks a bunch.